What's going on, everybody? Good Friday afternoon. And I want to take a video here to kind of address one of the big stories in the NFL right now. I know I'm a little bit late on this. I know everyone's already sounded off here. I know everybody's already voiced their takes, but I decided to sit on this for a little bit, kind of really think about it. And also, I wanted to continue to beat along with the draft stuff, which is always going to take priority on this channel because that's the stuff we got to get through before April. We got the whole rest of the off season to think about stuff like this. But this is definitely worth talking about. It doesn't feel like the league usually goes through this much change in one off season. This feels more significant than usual. I don't know if it is. It feels more significant, though. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that the league decided on at the annual league meetings and just kind of give my takes on it and just dig into try first of all, let's just try to understand how this is going to change things. So this article from NBC Sports kind of runs down the changes that were decided on, and a lot of it is kind of minor, and I don't really have anything to say about it. Coaches can make a third replay challenge if either of their first two challenges are successful. Okay, sure. Now basically you get two failed challenges before you can't challenge anymore. So sounds fair to me, sounds fine. Offense can now be assessed a penalty for a major foul on a play where the offense throws an interception or loses a fumble, even if the foul took place before the change of possession and the defense also committed a penalty on the play. Okay, I guess that's just a way of being able to punish a team for a penalty that is more severe than a typical one. They don't want it to cancel out because of a minor penalty on the other team. Sure. Replay can be used to overturn a ruling that a quarterback was down or out of bounds. I don't know why that wasn't a thing before. I feel like I've seen people challenge that before, so I'm kind of surprised this was ever a thing. I thought this was already reviewable, but it's reviewable now if it wasn't before. Replay can now be used to determine whether the game clock expired before the ball was snapped. I mean that's a pretty rare occurrence, so can't imagine that having a big impact, but obviously that's fine. Note that it does not say play clock though, so I don't think they've allowed that. And there are a couple other things like unlimited number of designated for return transactions in the postseason. Players, a club may designate a maximum of two players for return when placed on injured reserve. Unlimited quarterback practice squad elevations. Some other little things, stuff that doesn't really need to be talked about very much, I don't think. Like everything I just went over is kind of like, okay, move on. But there are three things that happened at the league meetings this year that are, I think, very interesting. First, I want to talk about the trade deadline because this is the one that I think is just definitely a good thing. The trade deadline has moved to the Tuesday after week 9. So basically, the trade deadline is now halfway through the season. Previously, when I was younger, it was much earlier than that, and this obviously bumps it back even further. So now we're going to have situations where teams get to decide whether or not they're going to be buyers or sellers even later in the season than typical, which I think is great. I love this. I think it's awesome. I think that having one more game to realize, oh, we're terrible, or oh, we're one player away. We could make a splash trade here and maybe go compete for the Super Bowl. I think that having that freedom is a really good thing. So this I'm all for. I love the trade deadline getting pushed to week 9. Like that one a lot. Kickoff rules have changed to a low impact kick similar to what was used in the XFL. And if you haven't watched the XFL, then I mean honestly, you probably already seen the pictures on X, but basically the kicker's kind of by himself on his side of the field kicking the ball, and both coverage units are down on the other side, lined up 10 yards from each other at like the 30 and 20, and then you have the returner back near the goal line. So I like it. I am interested to see how teams adjust to this because I could see there being a lot of kickoff returns for touchdowns with this setup because Traditionally, when you're trying to return a kickoff, you can have a good return, but you've got to work through wave after wave after wave to actually get it to the end zone. You've got to really maneuver your way through multiple lanes and usually get some missed tackles and usually have somebody make a mistake in order for you to get a touchdown. But with the whole coverage unit starting like 30 yards in front of you instead of 70 yards from you, like the way it was before, now you're talking about a situation where you make one cut, one good cut and go, you could be gone. So I think you're going to see a lot more kickoff touchdowns and big kickoff returns with this setup. Defenses are going to have to learn to adjust. I think you're going to see some teams like send guys back so they can be like a safety, a last line of defense for a big kickoff return. I think you're going to see teams try to learn how to mitigate the big plays, and it's not going to happen overnight. I'm especially interested to see what happens when a kickoff unit decides to use the end around, where they have everybody going one way, and then they have one guy peeling back to the other side, and he gets the handoff from the kickoff returner. And if the coverage unit bid it all, he could just be gone. Like if the guy getting the handoff is some kind of speedster, then it's over. So that's probably going to happen quite a bit until teams figure out how to not commit overly hard. It's going to make the kickoffs more exciting, and I can dig it. I'm worried about it adding additional randomness to a game because you could have games flip because of big kickoff returns and kickoff touchdowns, where it kind of throws a element of randomness into the game, especially at first. But I think that's what the NFL wants, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You have more upsets, more shocking results. So I like it. And then you've got this last one, and this is the one that everyone's talking about right now, the hip drop tackle. So I'm sure you've heard about it by now because it's all anybody has talked about for days. Hip drop tackles are now banned in the NFL, and if one does them, there will be a 15-yard penalty and an automatic first down on the defense. So a hip drop tackle, you've seen the videos, you've seen like, Geno Smith got a hip drop tackle by Isaiah Simmons, and it actually hurt him in that game against the Giants. And one reason why this conversation is compelling is that it was a play against the Seahawks that got this conversation really started. Because hip drop tackles have been around for a while, but that play was like a turning point for people to start talking about banning it. And then you had like the Mark Andrews play. That was another good example of a hip drop tackle that got somebody injured that provoked the argument further to the point where they've now gotten rid of it. So basically, a hip drop tackle, again, go watch the Isaiah Simmons, Geno Smith play if you want to get an idea of what it looks like in practice. But basically, the reason why it's getting banned, and I want to start there because I understand what the league is trying to say here. The effect on the player being tackled is very similar to the horse collar tackle, where your legs kind of go underneath you, you get pulled back, and it puts your legs at serious risk of getting injured. And there's a high propensity for injury on horse collar tackles, and hip drop tackles kind of do the same thing in effect. They pull your legs underneath you, and then you go down on them, and you get bent backwards. So I do have some understanding of this decision, but I cannot help but think about all the things that have been taken away from defense over the last 20 years. You could probably go back further than that, but I'll just go back 20 years. All the things that you used to be able to do on defense that you cannot do anymore. I'm wondering, when is it going to get to be too much? When is it going to just become impossible? When are you just not going to be able to do it? Like, last year was a good year overall for defense. You had some really good defensive units out there. Scoring was down. And they do this, and it's like, okay, is scoring going to pick back up because it's really hard to tackle now? Like, you can't go high. They don't want you going low. They don't want you doing the hip drop. They don't want you doing the horse collar. They don't want you committing illegal contact in coverage down the field. They don't want you having hands to the face. They don't want you, hitting the helmet. They don't want you stroking the helmet. It's like they keep taking things away from these defensive players. At a certain point, it's going to be too much, and every game is going to be like remember those Texas Tech versus Baylor games where it would just be like whoever gets the ball last wins, and the final score was always like 54-51. It's going to turn into that. And I know that's a common complaint of modern NFL, but we're not there yet. We are not there yet, but we will get there if you continue to take things away from these defenders. If you getting rid of this hip drop tackle, that's a non-trivial part of football. Like DK Metcalf did a hip drop tackle on Budda Baker on his famous chase down tackle after the interception, the 100-yard return, or the almost 100-yard return. That was a hip drop tackle. That would be a 15-yard. Now it would have been like a 1-yard penalty because they had already returned it so close, but it would have been a penalty. Like it's hard. It's hard to not use it. And what you might see now is defensive players just diving for the ankles, diving for the legs all the time, which, okay, that might work, but I wonder if that's going to cause injuries too. Like, let's say players just start going for the legs all the time now because you can't do the hip drop. And let's say a bunch of players start tearing their ACLs because they're getting tackled in the legs. Are they going to take that away too? And then what are you going to do? What are you going to take away next? And at what point does it become impossible to even play this sport anymore? So, can't get behind it. Again, I do have a little bit of sympathy for it because I understand that it's a play where a lot of players do get injured. But I also just don't think that that's a good enough reason to get rid of it. So I'm not a big fan of that one, and I'm a little bit concerned because these games to start the 2024 season will probably be rough. Because all these players are used to being able to do that. All these players are used to having that be part of their arsenal as a defensive player. So they're going to go out there and do it. They're going to get flagged for it. They're not going to be able to stop immediately. Like, I remember Roy Williams, who was the guy who basically created the horse collar tackle because that was his thing. He would get beat, he'd be in a bad spot in coverage or just chasing the play, and he had big, strong hands. So he would grab the guy by his horse collar or the back of his jersey and pull him down. And what would happen there was even after the play got banned, he continued to do it. And eventually I remember he got fined, he got suspended for games. He actually got in some degree of he lost game checks over that because he couldn't stop doing it because it was natural to him. You're going to have a lot of defenders who are like, I'm so used to this, I'm not going to be able to stop it. So it's going to be ugly at first. There are going to be a lot of flags in these early games. And I think that if we're going to continue to watch this sport, which most of us are, we need to just kind of accept that this is a thing that is going to happen and not get mad about it, not get upset about it, because you have to adjust. You have to accept that it's going to affect every team more or less equally, and you have to prepare appropriately. So know in your head that this is going to be a crap show. And know in your head that while it is obviously bad for the sport, it's also going to be hopefully fair across all 32 teams. And if that's the case, then all you can do as a team is understand the effects it has on you and how to mitigate those effects. Like, defense is getting harder and harder to play. Don't worry so much about defense. Build your offense. Build your offensive line. Get a great set of skill players. Get a great quarterback. Get a great coordinator. And build an offense that can score 40, 50 points a game. Because that's what the league wants you to be. So you build a great offense that can take advantage of this, even if you don't like it, instead of focusing all your efforts on a defense that may just not be able to get to where you want it to go no matter what because of stuff like this. That's probably the best you can do. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think about all this. I just wanted to take one video to cover it and talk about it because, look, I know. I remember I said some stuff about the Geno tackle last year. People got mad at me. People didn't like it. People didn't like that I was kind of defending the play a little bit. People didn't appreciate that. I understand that it injured our quarterback and people aren't going to be happy about that, but At the same time, I got to ask, at what cost? At what cost do we get something like this? All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks.